And welcome everyone. Chapter 12, The Way of Love. Um, we're going to start with Kabir today. And Kabir, can you start with your what is this chapter talking about, uh, and maybe also touch on the meaning of devotion because that's not very, at least when I read it, I didn't feel very deep. Like it's very different from what I would have thought. So, uh,
Yes, I would say that it wasn't the chapter which appealed to me the most when I started reading Bhagavad Gita for the first time way back in college. But at this point in my journey, I would have to say this is my favorite chapter because this is what is appealing me at this point in my journey. And yes, the meaning of devotion has definitely evolved, has been evolving for me. So, in the beginning, people, especially from the Indian background or even Christianity, I would say, believe devotion as devotion to a form, uh, to Jesus or to Krishna or to some sort of image of God. So, you are devoted to some form, some individual, even if they are superhuman, uh, a deva or a godlike being, supreme being. But devotion usually is taken in that way, and in Hindi it is called sakar bhakti, which means devotion to a form. But in India, as we have probably referred in one of the chapters before, Sufis refer to something nirakar bhakti, which is devotion to the formless and which is everywhere. So that is something which is not very commonly understood in devotion. And I think Krishna is hinting at that. He's not excluding devotion to the form, but most of the chapter, if you see most of the uh, uh, shlokas and guidance of Krishna, is towards this devotion or commitment or longing to our true nature within, to the supreme being. To that extent, I feel that how much, how desperately one longs to be with their formless nature, and how much we are tired and even disgusted with being living a life of a egoic autobiography which is so limiting, and want to just stay with our formless being. So that that longing is what I feel today in my journey, is how I see devotion.
yeah. And what about the chapter in general, Kabir? Like, if you can.
Yeah, I believe that in this chapter, Krishna is hinting through these 20 verses. It's a really small chapter, but I feel he has covered all aspects of devotion. And again, he has actually quite emphatically stated in the chapter that uh, uh, the path of devotion is in fact much faster than path of jnana, than path of uh, rationality. Someone trying to use their mind to understand that they are beyond form, that they are consciousness. We have seen a lot of intellectuals who study scriptures and try to understand them, memorize them, reflect on them, talk about that. And Krishna is saying that all is good. They too would eventually come to me. But the one who is just longing for me again, he is talking about the emotional aspect of the path more than the intellectual aspect. And he's saying, I prefer, in the sense, by preferring, he means that is much faster and much easier. And there, when your mind is not involved, when you are being guided by your intuition, you won't make an error. At one point, he clarifies that to Arjun, that in the other paths where mind is involved, or you have to understand and you are doing it, there is a doer, there is possibility of making mistakes, slowing down, getting stuck. But if you leave it to me, if you surrender to me means the deeper truth within, the absolute consciousness within ourselves. If we trust it, the faith, the trust on our intuition, he is saying, is the fastest way to reaching me and to abiding me. I thought that was really powerful.
Nadine, you want to share your views on the chapter?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree, like, or I feel the same way what Kabir said about the chapter. It's about you getting the fastest there if you surrender and you let go and you trust. I feel this was that very important point in the chapter that you can't think your way into being. You are just it, you know, there is no knowledge how to do that. There is no guide and you follow that and that's how it goes. Like if you overthink or try to think yourself into it, it's not happening. It's actually happening when you're letting go, when you probably the least expect it, and you're just living in the moment, being in that formless state and allow what is there right now, then you're entering it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both of you have covered. It's a short chapter, but yeah, for me, I think I was telling Kabir before, like some chapter 9, that we should recap it. Recap like the previous chapters. To me, it's also felt like it's kind of summarizing some of the other ways and then putting all of that in one context. That you can start with knowledge and then say if that's not possible, then you can go and do meditation. And if you are not disciplined enough to do meditation, then you can do karma yoga, which is like selfless service. It talks about that. And then it says that even if that's not also something, then it's the easiest way, in a way, that you just surrender yourself and you have complete devotion uh in me. And that's probably the easiest way, it says. I don't know if it's explicitly the fastest way. And also I was not sure if when it says that it puts that order, right? Knowledge and then meditation and then service, and then it says if you can't do so I was also curious about that dimension of this, uh of like that wording, right? Like if if that is hard, then this is easy. But then does that also imply some kind of superiority, inferiority in terms of I'm just, this is just a technically I'm curious that is that also implying that uh
Uh, I'm not sure if it is implied there or not, but I can share my understanding and experience working with so many people. And I feel that there are people with different predominant tendencies. For some with certain tendencies, karma yoga comes easier. For some, meditation comes easier, and yet for some, devotion comes easier. So I believe that what comes naturally to us is the fastest way for us, and I believe that's what sort of Krishna is hinting. He is kind of, and I'm glad you covered that. He is talking to Arjun that all of these ways come to me. So you can try this way or that way. And even the nature of bhakti, by the way, the devotion, like I said, evolves. One might start with devotion to Krishna as a person or as a god, and even that would eventually take one within. I have a beautiful example just came to me. Let me share this. So I had a neighbor when I was growing up, and she was a devotee of Krishna to the form of Krishna. So she would decorate the statue, put food, and give bath, and just like treat that statue like a living being. And her devotion was absolute to the form, so much so that she had surrendered everything. Anything not working in the life, she'd say, it's Krishna's will. I don't care. Things will be sorted. And in that way, she would surrender results of all her actions. She would do whatever has to be done. But then, if she gets the result, fine. If she doesn't get the result, fine. She would always say, I remember I would used to go play in their house. And I remember hearing this all the time from her that, it's Krishna's will, it's Krishna's will. So, from that perspective, I never saw her worried or anxious. She had no regrets about the past. She had no anxiety about the future. She wasn't present because she had surrendered everything somehow to Krishna. And a major tragedy happened to her. Her eldest son, who was 16, 17, he actually died in a bike accident. And he was a little older to me at that time. And in fact, they discovered his body after several days. So he, in fact, couldn't get proper treatment, so died very painfully, is what everybody discovered. And everybody thought that this would be the end of this woman because she was so attached to him. And I remember when the body was brought to the home, this woman had all the tears coming, and she was saying, he is happier with Krishna. This is Krishna as well. So, at the level of her devotion and surrender and the faith in Krishna as a god helped her deal with this massive, tragedy which would have broken anyone. And in fact, she was supporting others and telling them, "Why are you crying so much? He's with Krishna. He's happy." And uh, well, if as intellectuals we might argue that, oh, she's deluded, but at the ultimate level, we know that at the level of consciousness and karma and consciousness taking form, everything is actually fine at that level, right? So she might or might not have intuitively felt that oneness yet, but she is moving in that direction through her faith. So, what I wanted to say in response to your question was that uh, even devotion to a form might seem very different to devotion to the formless, or being absorbed in the formless, where your autobiography completely disappears, may feel like very different paths. Similarly, devotion, somebody trying to meditate, watching their breath, might seem like a very different path, but someone watching their breath has to kind of trust life that while I'm here in a retreat, for example, for 10 days, watching my breath, I'm able to leave life to the God or to the Supreme Being or to life to take care of everything. So they have to have faith. When we turn off our phones and go to a retreat, we are hoping that things will be fine, and we have that faith. Unless we have that, we would be sitting there watching breath and worrying about everything, all our worldly responsibilities and family and so on. So, in a sense, all the paths, and Buddha also confirmed that, even though he was in fact sort of against idol worship, he saw people getting misled too much at those times, getting too attached with the idolatry and not able to go beyond. So he, in fact, suggested that it would be counterproductive to take that path at that time. But when he was asked, what is the most important step do you think on your path, on your guidance? The number one thing he said was Saddha, which is faith. He said you have to have faith on the path. You have to trust that. And how does that faith, by the way, develops also is from your experience. You give it a shot, you do it for 10 minutes, and you say, I did it for 10 minutes. I did experience intuitively certain degree of peace, certain degree of balance. Let me give it a shot. Let me try to do an hour. Let me try to do an hour every day. Oh, yes, it is working. So, based on that evidence, faith develops. That is another thing that clarified. And faith and devotion and bhakti are quite synonymous. So for Buddha, faith did not only mean blind faith. He clearly differentiated. He said, use your common sense, use your experience, and that way you would grow in your faith. You would see that you would get enough evidence to be able to walk on the path and not believing anything, but at least to be able to walk even, right? So from that perspective, to summarize and coming back to your question, I feel every path has devotion inbuilt into it. We can't walk on any path unless we are committed, we have faith. That the quality, or actually, I don't want to use the quality. I want to say that the way that faith is practiced in each path is slightly different. And remember, we were talking about chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and every time we were getting a little bit uh, perplexed that, okay, so what is the difference? What is the difference? But because we couldn't really find any differences. And now, again, in chapter 12, Krishna is hinting at all these paths, and it feels like they are all integrated again.
Yeah. Like, I think I agree with you, but I also kind of feel that's more like that's one dimension of it, that all of these qualities are the quality of being on this path. But then on the same hand, these are different qualities in terms of our own experience, because I can be enunciating something and I can also have faith in something, and they feel different things, right? Like intellect, like at least in one dimension they are same, that I have the faith to renunciate, but but I can be really selfish and not care about anyone, and that's why I'm okay with doing things. So I I see the merit. Like I feel it's redundant in some way to not talk about the differences, because then what's the point of talking about this if we can't talk about the discernment between these things. um and especially for, I think, because I'm saying that because I think as you go on the path, like I agree with you that yes, the path is same, and eventually it feels very similar. Uh, but like I didn't have devotion for the longest of the time, and then as I move forward on the path, I feel there's a lot more faith and devotion now. I can feel within me. So I think when you're starting, especially right when you're like starting up on the path, you have some superpower, right? Something you are really, somebody might be really good at bhakti, somebody might be really good at meditation, like, and then eventually, because the quality of the consciousness is same, once that consciousness starts rising within you, or that, I know that sentence, like we already have it, but once you're more connected with the consciousness, let's say, that's when you will see that everything eventually will start showing up. But the reason like these are paths probably is because where do you start, right? What is your strongest kind of, um, what comes most easy to you, right? And this chapter specifically is talking about that, like what comes easy to someone, like if somebody, and that's why I think it's very interesting that devotion is something which is there in all the religions, and probably something which is easier to explain, which is probably easier to experience. I don't know, maybe like we can talk a little bit about that. Devotion being there in every religion as a primary actual, like most religions primarily start from, like at least religion, my understanding, has mostly about devotion towards God in some way or the other, and following what he has said, literally like by faith and not by logic. Like at least the Abrahamic religions have like books which tell them how to operate in the world, and then you have to follow them because that's what God has said. And so why is this like something which has been really picked up amongst all the paths? Why is devotion the one which has been taken up by most people in the world? At least that's my understanding. Maybe I'm not correct here, but my understanding is devotion is taken up by most.
I agree with you. I Can I say something, Nadine, and then maybe you can comment. So, firstly, I think the first part of what you just shared, I couldn't agree more. I'm absolutely agreeing with how you put it, that there is a reason these are presented as different paths, because in the beginning we almost, and I am with you, I almost had aversion to the kind of devotion which I was experiencing around me. I found it like blind devotion. I found it like making people superstitious, people not even using their basic common sense, people sometimes ruining their lives and relationships uh, in the name of devotion. So I almost had aversion to it. And if somebody had told me this is the only path, I probably wouldn't even explore spirituality. So I'm absolutely agreeing with you that. And now, like I said, at this point, I'm saying this is my favorite chapter. This path, I really get it now. And this is what you put it very beautifully, that you can start anywhere. And that is why different paths are required. And as you move forward, you might see, oh, but it's the same thing. That's what they were doing. Oh, that's what that aunt was doing. That's what my mom was doing. It's not really different, right? I can empathize also to some extent, not to justify the superstitions or blind beliefs, but at least understand what was the point of it. right? And how it gets misused or misunderstood by people. And sometimes, and I'm going to talk about religion also, but I feel like saying that people have used religion and devotion also for their nefarious motives to control people and control masses. And we must not dismiss that part as we talk about it, right? Because we have seen fanatics in the name of devotion, murders being justified as way to going to heaven and so on. So let us not shy away from mentioning that. But having said that, I absolutely agree with you that it seems the way our human consciousness is at this point on our planet, or have been in last 5,000 years, 10,000 years, it seems that the idea that we are beyond body mind is too much for people to digest. For the most people, they 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 have this strong belief that they are just this body mind, but there is some probably intuitive feeling of some other power, and what appeals most to them are certain ideas of a superior being to which they can surrender. And that seems to be the starting point which appeals to majority of humanity at this point on our planet. And I'm agreeing with you. If you look at all the major religions, the books and the parts, even though they might be hinting to the deeper realities, like if you read what is being written or shared by Christian mystics, that seems very different from what the church is talking, or the Catholic Church is talking, or sometimes even the interpretations of Bible. The common interpretations of Bible are much more focused on the stories and about the form and belief system than the deeper aspects of it, which is about the fact that God is within you. And there are enough hints, even in the Bible and Quran and all the major religions, they are all hinting. And if I definitely, when I studied the lives of the founders, I could see that's what touched them. They realized the reality was within them, and we can talk about it, but it may take a long time. They have all mentioned it enough that the reality is within you, it's not outside you. But people, somehow the masses have overlooked that part. They just make their statues and they say, okay, Jesus, you save me. Buddha, you save me. Right? And please fix my children and solve our problems. It's not all, I would not dismiss it at this point. I used to dismiss it completely as foolish behavior. But I see that at least surrendering to some form in some way is better than not surrendering anything at all. Is living a life in a absolutely arrogant way or a materialistic way. Although it is unhelpful if you I think Swami Vivekanand put it beautifully. He said it's okay to do certain things in your kindergarten in grade 1, but if you are doing same things when you're 15-year-old, 20-year-old, then it's ridiculous. So you need to evolve. And that's why Swami Vivekanand was frustrated. He found that and people in India or even in the West, that people get stuck at kindergarten and they don't evolve. That's what Buddha was frustrated with, and that's why he kind of he had to, probably reluctantly, I don't know, had to suggest not going and worship the idols. He probably realized that the way people's consciousness is and their belief system is, if you do that as a child, then people are not able to go beyond that. Nadine, do you want to add something? Or
Yeah, you said many different things, so I'm trying to see where I want to come in. So, what I definitely feel is that the type of religion that I got to know and I grew up with, it tries to make you believe that your life is determined outside. It's almost giving you the permission to give away your responsibility for yourself, because you are not, it's outside what determines your life. And I feel this is a very dangerous way of living if you're, I mean, it's a comfort zone also because you don't need to take charge or responsibility in the sense because you explain everything outside. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I grew up with this devotion. I had to go to church every weekend, even during the week when I was a child, and I found it so horrible because I was sitting in that church and I was like, what are they all doing there? Like, we have to follow prayers, we have to sit, we have to be silent, we're not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. Then you have to learn by heart all these prayers. No one really talks to you about the meaning, So it felt so like I didn't like it. It didn't resonate with me. So for me, that's why I'm not a friend of religion at all because I feel it's creating a collective for people where it's a very rigid belief system and people are not invited to follow their own intuition and their own path and figure out their own way. I feel it doesn't, and I'm talking from how I experienced it. Maybe there are people out there that have a very different experience with religion and so on, could be. But I didn't feel that it's really inviting to um go beyond. Yeah, that's why it's very confusing with because religion and spirituality are somehow also so close with each other in a way, no? Like because ultimately you're trying to self-realize yourself, but through what path? Not like what you said with that neighbor of yours who so dearly believed in Krishna and in that statue that she was having. And ultimately, I guess it was her living outside what actually is inside, right? So she had that faith being there as a visual while it was all a while inside her. So I think there are also different ways how people can live and deal with it because as you shared, she dealt with that tragedy of her son very differently from other people. So where did she get the strength? Where did she get where didn't she break and gave up her life, fall into a depression or whatnot? Like I mean so many scenarios are there that we see in people that can happen, right? But somehow she accepted it in a way, and lived on with the belief that he's with Krishna in a way. What also this chapter is about, the immortal self, right? Like the soul lives on. It's the body form which is gone. I mean, if you're really going beyond of this body, material, physical, phenomenal world, you know that you can communicate with souls that are already gone. And you can communicate even with your own past lives. You can maybe even talk to your future self, like who is even saying that time is what we experience here in this human world, right? So if you're open to that and you feel that within yourself, then you have a very different way of navigating yourself through life, through all the things that are coming on your way, right? Being it joy, but being it a tragedy as well. So where does it come from? And do you need to follow the same thing what others do and force yourself into a path? No. Like it's really about figuring out maybe your own way, what appeals to you, what naturally comes to you. I mean, which people are you attracting into your life and which path are you ultimately choosing to self-realize, right? So I think I this chapter really gives examples but offers and shows there like anyway it's about, are you surrendering, are you letting go of the outcome of what you want? Like it's really about, are you truly living in the moment? Yeah, maybe just that what I felt sharing after listening to you, Kabir.
Thank you.
Want to talk about I think some of the things it talks about devotion in this which are different from again like a normal day-to-day understanding, which is again like it says, I want to read specific, the one I love who is incapable of ill will, who is friendly and compassionate, living beyond the reach of I and mine and of pleasure and pain. patient, contented, self-controlled, firm in faith, with all their heart and all their mind given to me, with such as these I am in love. So I found it very, so definitely the reference to pleasure and pain feels like a reference to Vipassana, like the basics of Vipassana, where you uh, try to be more in a, and I and mine is also a reference to being in Drishta Bhav, being in that mode of an observer, not as a doer. So putting that as what devotion is a pretty surprising read for me. Uh, eh, eh, you want to talk about that, Kabir? Like,
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And that's why I feel that devotion is the key for me at this point, because I see absolutely no difference. The reason or the only way I could be in the space of witnessing is trust, faith in my intuition, in allowing my intuition to guide me on whether to act in a circumstance or not, and not depending on my intellect. And this shift from intellect to intuition is what I see today as devotion. And that's what Krishna is mentioning. And I think these are the verses little later in the chapter. And I think he's kind of also showing the evolution of devotion as you read these verses from 1 to 20, right? And later in the chapter, he is mentioning what you just read, that just allowing things to be and be in this intuitive space of witnessing, where you don't, as a doer or as a person, you don't take actions. You sometimes would find yourself saying something or doing something from this intuitive place. And many times I see that happening even in this session or the counseling sessions I do, where I have absolutely no idea what I would say. And I would say the person is saying this, and I end up saying something. And as I'm talking to the client, I'm also listening to myself. So things are happening more than we realize, far more than we realize, and that again make us humble and make us wonder, where are these ideas coming from? Where are these words coming from? It's definitely not coming from me as an intellect, as an autobiography. I never read this. I never heard this. How come it came out of this mouth? And then you kind of become humble, and you trust that there is probably something beyond, much beyond this mind and the physical time that we are talking about in this lifetime. And that is faith in action.
yeah, yeah, it's very interesting because I'm still like, just this definition of, which is a lot closer to Vipassana and a lot closer to, as a definition of devotion, is again a very different interpretation for me. Uh, and it's really like, yeah, it's a fulfillment for me.
I also some remembered something. Many people who have studied Advait Vedanta, or even people who are doing PhD in Oxford on Advait Vedanta, they would, one of the top books they would read would be I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj, who never spoke English, but people translated his Marathi, and he was, we might have referred in the past chapters, was just a local cigarette maker, and from a very poor background, who never studied any scriptures, didn't know Sanskrit, didn't even know Hindi, and his words are absolutely same as what is hidden in Vedanta and Upanishads, right? Coming from an absolute layman, and he it is read as authority today. So. When he was asked by a student, so this is the master, the great grandmaster of Vedanta and Advaita. It is for beginners, for people who start reading Vedanta. Sometimes some scientists who dismiss devotion and bhakti absolutely, and they think it is for the uh, people with low IQs who are fools, and they think they are studying Advaita and they are so much superior, and they uh, mistakenly feel that high IQ or intellect is what is required to be in this path of Vedanta or Advaita. So when someone like that was once asking Nisardat Maharaj, what do you think is the most important thing to come to the place where you have arrived? He said, absolute longing and devotion to the supreme truth in yourself. He said, that's all you need. You don't have to understand a word I am saying. You don't have to analyze. You don't have to read any books. You just have to really, really want to be one with the reality, with the supreme being. And if you want it the way a person drowning in water wants oxygen, you will just get it. All you need is that longing. And when I'm reading this chapter, uh, then I see again and again Krishna saying, the one who really wants to be one with me as in supreme consciousness, the formless, the one without any limits. If you really, really long to be there with your highest nature, because it's already here, you don't have to become from limited to unlimited. You don't have to evolve into unlimited. You are it. So why don't we feel we are it? Because of the game of Maya, for some reason, we don't want to believe that and that's how Maya is explained in Vedanta, is this ignorance, a force of ignorance, which makes you believe that you are limited, that you are distant, that you are away, and that you need to do something to get there. And all of these masters, and in this chapter, Krishna is saying, no, just if you really want it, I will take care of the rest. I, as in the supreme consciousness, will take care of the rest. You can't make any mistakes because you are not doing anything. Yeah.
I think what you're saying here is also very important because a lot of people believe that self-realization only comes if they, I don't know, if they have a devoted life in a temple or they go into a monastery or they go into, and I think this example of that cigarette maker who actually self-realized and got it just shows so beautifully that it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're a business person, if you're a teacher, if you live in a poor family, in a rich family, in a wealthy family, at this country, here, there, blah, blah, all of this, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what you are doing. It matters who you are. Like if you are realizing what life is about, and it really doesn't matter how you fill your day. If you wash dishes or you do admin tasks or you sit at your computer, the question is, are you really listening and hearing Krishna within you? Like, are you following that intuitive voice in you? Or are you shutting it down because you have a certain imagination or plan that you need to do to fulfill XYZ, to achieve this, to have next month's 50K on your bank account or this or that, what is driving you? Like, I think if you're really recognizing the driver is Krishna within you and you don't have to achieve anything according to what the collective society decided is achievement, success, or whatnot, I think then you're truly free in whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go in a specific place for that. It's in you, wherever
Yes.
you are.
Thanks. I feel like saying something. I do want to talk a little bit about prayer because this is the chapter on devotion. And again, this has been a big change in me, that when I started my journey, I saw myself as an intellect and an absolute atheist and a non believer. And I was walking on the path of spirituality as an intellectual. And I thought prayer is for fools again, looking down upon it. And at this point in my journey, I feel prayer is really powerful. And the most powerful prayers, I'm sure they are everywhere. I have found in Bible, and the ones which has touched me a lot is poetry of Rumi, where I would say that in his books, on one of the chapters, he's speaking as one with the supreme consciousness, and he's saying, "Who should I pray to? There is no one else." And this is so beautiful. There is this one complete beingness. And in the next chapter, when he's feeling like an identity as a person, He's saying, come on, why do you separate me from you? Just take me in your lap and keep me with you. Why do you go away? Why do you allow me to go away, Lord? And he's talking about this reality within himself as a relationship almost with their intimate partners. And we have seen a lot of uh, bhakti movement poets like Surdas, Tulsidas talking about it. And in their text, every now and then you will see that they are saying that, oh, but how will you leave me? I am so silly. I am one with you. Where would I go? Where is the place where you are not? But you are everywhere. How can I go away from you, oh Lord? Right? So these prayers, I think, as we are on the path, as we are not feeling this oneness due to the force of ignorance, I feel it's really, really helpful to pray. And I think as Krishna is talking to Arjun, that you can, okay, if you can't have this absolute longing, it's okay. You can meditate, you can do karma yoga, or you do that. There would be people out there, they'll say, yeah, that appeals to me. I want to work for the world. I want to work for the benefit of people. That is more rational. And Krishna says, good, do that and don't worry about the result, and you will come to me. And then going further, he is telling Arjun, and I believe what he meant is pray. If you can't even do that, just pray to me. And I think prayer is something which melts our arrogance, our identity, and it kind of creates an opening. And I also want to again remember that auntie, the neighbor auntie in this case. And I saw that in my grandmother, also my maternal grandmother. In my maternal grandmother, because I was close to her over several years, I could actually see the evolution where her prayers were to something outside of her. And because of that, because she was not in future, not in past, she was surrendered, always in present moment. She eventually started feeling it within herself. Okay. So this process of surrendering, either through karma yoga or through bhakti yoga or through meditation, you are watching breath, you are trying to make yourself not crave, not having aversion. This purifies our sanskaras and our tendencies. And because the reality is anyway not outside, it's within ourselves, we then start feeling it. We feel. And I remember my mom, who I could never get through intellectually in my conversations with her. She went for a retreat and she said, I don't know, I just start watching my breath and I feel so much joy, so much peace. I feel presence of God in me. I thought he was out, but I see it in me, just like my grandmother. And so I started seeing sense that it is not so uh, it's not so opposite if your object of devotion is outside to begin with. If you are smart enough and open enough, it will bring you inside. The problem is if we get stuck with the beliefs, the strong beliefs that Jesus is a person outside of you who will save you. And if you talk about anything else, that the God is within you, you are actually doing blasphemy against. And this is all the games played by priests and people in power trying to control masses uh, through religion, unfortunately. But we want to differentiate and understand that there is some sense in even the outer devotion, and why sometimes genuine masters pointed or advised people to follow that.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up the point of prayer because I think there are also like very strong connotations to prayer. Nah? Like when we talk about prayer, we think about something religious or something like, at least for me, this comes up. But really, prayer is something that we all do in one way or the other. Like, when you wish for something, when you want to materialize something, what is it? Shall we call it prayer or your manifestation or your dreams that you try to put out there and to bring into reality for yourself? What is it really? It's like, I don't know, this thoughts are energy, right? So what you're thinking, and if you observe in your life where you put your focus on, you get more of that in a way. In what way or the other? It's coming more teaching you a lesson or just giving you the fruits directly. That's always different paths are coming through. But for me, a prayer or a wish or where you put your focus on, it all goes in a direction that you wish to evolve somewhere, right? So, and I think you can write your own prayer even. And yes, you find prayer in poetry, you find it in, I don't know, different mystics. Some people find their home in religious prayers as well. Let it be like whoever finds their way through what, it's individual, I think. Yeah.
The last topic on this chapter, I'm going to talk about love. Like, I can already feel how moving on this path is actually about love, eventually. So, and like how bhakti is love, but I don't think so I'm able to put it in words. Maybe you can help me in this, but so I can I can feel it. Like, I can feel why this is the way of love. Uh, how it is about well-being for everything around you and for you, and because everything is same, right? So it has to be about love in that way. But could be like, the chapter is titled "The Way of Love."
Oh, yes. I mean, I think the entire spirituality, if it can be summarized in one word, it would be love. Because let's just take an example of phenomenally what happens when we love our child or our parent or a friend or an intimate lover. We feel so much oneness. Their pain is our pain, their joy is our joy, right? And we sometimes would give ourselves pain to make them joyful because uh, it is giving us satisfaction and joy just to see our beloved to be in joy. And what is happening, if you see, in spirituality, our ego is dissolving, our identity and autobiography is dissolving, and we can't find ourselves. But there is life and there is oneness, and you suddenly realize they are not different beings as you realize your consciousness formless. So there is not one consciousness and two consciousness and three consciousness. See, there is one consciousness. So even in phenomenal love, two become one. Your agendas become one agenda. You let go many times of uh, you know uh, your comfort and so on, and you do it out of love. Nobody's forcing you. That is a glimpse. And at the level of consciousness, you intuitively feel there is this oneness and there is no two. And for me, that is the definition of love, where many become one. Many is becoming one, and that is Advaita eventually, where in Advaita, even space and time and forms, they are saying, oh, this is just oneness experiencing itself. So absolute, even in Nibbana, what Buddha points out, the ultimate uh, goal, so to speak, of the path where one ends is absolute oneness. And it's not, again, oneness as in mind would think, that sounds boring, oneness without anybody else. No, there is all this manifestation, there is all of this duality, but you sense in background there is absolute oneness. And the result is also in being in this state, as we have had we all have had glimpses in phenomenal times when we have fallen in love, so to speak, even briefly at phenomenal level, we experience so much joy. And when uh, teenager is in love, sometimes you can say, hey, why are you singing? Why are you so just floating in the air? So you can sense love is in the air because there's so much joy. You feel fulfilled. And at phenomenal level, unfortunately, it it cannot last because of the law of nature and the way duality works. But if you look at mystics, if you again read Sufis and Rumi and even Rumi, in fact, was never a guy of poetry. He always wrote, he was a very serious person. He used to write prose and give lectures in mosques. And when first time he was told by his guide that you would become a great poet, he said, I've never written one poetry. What are you talking? And as of today, I believe I think nobody argues that he's the greatest poet to come out of Middle East. Some even argue in the world, right? So, and he was like, oh my God, the supreme being can turn someone such an intellectual into a poet. And my own master, Muji Baba, he also mentions how he could never talk. He was a person, he was an artist, and he never thought that he could guide someone through words. And he is able to guide people on the path of Advaita and Vedant using so many words, sometimes talking for 2 hours, 3 hours. He was like, I have no idea that I could talk so much and go into nitty gritties. So, yeah, so love to me is oneness. And I feel that is the essence of all the paths and all the spirituality. If one is walking on any path and one is feeling bitter and heavy and egoic, then there is definitely something wrong. One has to feel, uh, there are many synonyms of love: kindness, compassion. A Buddha used to use the word karuna, maitri, mudita, upekha. All of them are synonyms of word. Karuna is when you see someone suffering and you feel compassion for them. It's love. Maitri is a general feeling of well-being for everybody at all times, is love. Uh, Mudita is when you see someone is happy, they are joyful, and just looking at their joy, you are feeling joy. Again, love. So for him, these were Brahmic qualities. When he said that as you would mature on the path, you would see these qualities are growing in you. So uh, that is also the evidence in somebody's journey. If they are on any path, are you feeling lighter? Are you feeling joyful? Are you feeling these qualities? Are you feeling kindness, spontaneous compassion, spontaneous joy, feeling other people's joy? You see someone suffering and you have this uh, urge, natural spontaneous urge, if you can do something to relieve their suffering. If that is not happening and somebody is deluding them that because they had that glimpse and they experience that vision that they are evolving on the path, it would be they would be fooling themselves.
Very beautifully put, Kabir. Um, Nadine, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just thinking because that's very like interesting because I'm also thinking of empathy, for example, because you just said, if you see someone suffering or you see someone in joy to feel compassion. And I think, yes, and still it is also important not to take on the other ones, like you're not showing love because you're suffering as much as your loved one. It's because I think the the collective love language is also in a way, oh, my loved one is suffering, so I share the suffering, so maybe that brings ease. Nah. Like there's also this thing of taking on as a sign of love, but that's actually not the path. No, that's not like true.
Yes, but may I say something? And yes, so empathy is definitely doesn't mean that you are suffering with the sufferer, which is actually makes us dysfunctional in helping the other person. So I'm with you. In fact, anybody who is walking on the inner journey, on the spiritual path, because you are connected with your inner joy, you are at peace. And when you are seeing someone suffering, there may be even tears in your eyes, but you're not suffering. You can feel their suffering, and your peace can then relieve their suffering. Feeling someone's pain or empathizing with them does not mean, as a matter of fact, if you are suffering you cannot truly empathize, because the state of suffering means you are in a state of resistance. See, pain is very different from suffering. So if you are suffering means you are in a state of resistance, and a state of resistance is a very selfish space. You can't empathize. If you are truly able to empathize with someone, it is because you are at peace. So that distance is important, and that's how you become a tool to help them come out of the suffering. And that is also the natural state of presence. If you are an inner journey, if you are in present moment, if you're not going to your head, this is what happens naturally. You don't have to need to do it consciously.
Exactly. So I found that very important to mention because often people mistake it.
No, I think that's a very good. I think what Kabir said before, like this, which I want to leave the viewers with in terms of this chapter, is that if you are on the path of bhakti and you're not feeling love for people around you, for situations around you, then that's a good indicator that are you feeling compassion and love. And obviously with the rider of what Nadine said, with which I agree. But I think there is a higher order uh like signal here, which is love. Uh, that if you're on this path, or especially of path of bhakti, and there has to be love within you and for everything around you. All right, great. Thank you guys. And we'll see you again next week with chapter 13.
Thank you.